Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview.
The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Tuesday, July 29th, and the New York Post is reporting that 5 have been killed, including one New York PD officer, an off-duty officer, in a shooting in Midtown Manhattan last night. So the report coming that a police officer and at least 4 other people were shot and killed and several other injured by a crazed gunman who stormed a swanky Midtown skyscraper early Monday evening before turning the gun on himself, sources said. The 27-year-old maniac barged into the 44-story building which houses Blackstone and the NFL headquarters, armed with a rifle, and opened fire around 6:30 p.m. during the evening rush, sending workers running for their lives, law enforcement sources told the Post. So there are still reports and other information happening as to the motivation, the identity, and the possible terror ties, and also mental health issues, which I think is definitely probable. Someone who would be capable of carrying this out would have to have the wrong worldview, obviously. But those reports are continuing to come out, and we'll cover a little bit more of this story later on in the program. Meanwhile, some better news. The new federal government policy seeks to restore religious freedom in the workplace, so including the freedom to talk about your faith in a manner that hopes to persuade a coworker that your religion is true is now allowed. So this coming from Fox News, federal agencies are now required to protect religious expression in the workplace, according to a new government-wide memo obtained by Fox News Digital on Monday, marking one of the most sweeping moves in decades to defend faith and freedoms in civil service. This came from the Office of Personnel Management memo, and this memo provided guidance to the agencies on robustly protecting and enforcing each federal government's employee's right to engage in religious expression in the federal workplace, consistent with the U.S. Constitution and other applicable sources of law. So this is coming as the Trump administration is intentionally seeking out ways to protect religious freedom, protect the rights that come from God, our Creator, including the right to life. And a U.S. judge has blocked the Trump-backed Medicaid cuts to Planned Parenthood. You'll remember with the One Big Beautiful Bill that there was a 12-month ban on all funding to Planned Parenthood centers. So this federal judge yesterday blocked enforcement of a provision in President Trump's recently enacted tax and spending bill, that's the One Big Beautiful Bill, that would deprive Planned Parenthood and its members of Medicaid funding, saying it's it is likely unconstitutional. That's Reuters typifying this as depriving Planned Parenthood. We would say that's a good thing. So the U.S. District Judge in Boston issued a preliminary injunction after finding the law likely violated the U.S. Constitution by targeting specifically Planned Parenthood's health centers for punishment for providing abortions. So for more on this, let's welcome in Father Frank Pavone, who is the founder of Priests for Life, and someone who I got to spend all yesterday afternoon with, and we recorded his podcast, which will be dropping next week, on a wide-ranging discussion of pro-life issues. So it's wonderful to see the headquarters there in Titusville, Florida at Priests for Life. So good morning, Father Frank, and thanks so much for coming on. So, a couple of these stories, where do you want to start?
Well, good morning, Jenna. Great to be with you. It was great to see you yesterday. Let's start with this last thing you mentioned, because I believe that this is not going to last very long, this temporary restraining order, because it's so ill-founded. I mean, the arguments are very, very weak. Targeting Planned Parenthood, punishing them legislatively for providing abortions. That's not what the One Big Beautiful Bill does. It's not talking about past behavior. It's not like, oh, look, you people have been doing abortions, so now we're going to take away your money. First of all, as RFK Jr. said so well, and it was put in a brief to the court on the part of HHS, he said, look, put simply, Planned Parenthood has no right to our taxpayer money, and the court should not create such a right. So putting this in big perspective, the courts have always upheld, since Roe v. Wade, the fact that the states are free to fund or not to fund abortion. They can direct funding towards childbirth instead of abortion, and this has been upheld and repeated in multiple Supreme Court decisions. But even more to the point, the One Big Beautiful Bill says not just to Planned Parenthood. First of all, Planned Parenthood by itself is not being targeted. It's the entire abortion industry. It's any entity whatsoever that's receiving Medicaid funds and at the same time is performing elective abortions. Those are the ones that are being told that as of October 1st, if you are still performing elective abortions, you're not entitled to this Medicaid funding. They have the choice, Jenna, to stop. It's, they talk about freedom of choice. This is not a matter of punishment. This is a matter of choice. You're going to continue doing abortions. You don't get the money. It's as simple as that. That's neither a legislative punishment nor is that discrimination.
So well said, and yet it seems that these federal judges have other ideas, and they would like to fabricate a so-called right for Planned Parenthood to be entitled to federal or state money over and above any of these parameters. And so I agree with you that I don't think that this preliminary injunction is going to hold very long, particularly in light of the recent opinion as well, speaking to preliminary injunctions and how these district judges shouldn't have the jurisdictional authority to just make these sweeping decisions for the nation. And so I hope that that is also further addressed in this particular case. But hopefully this won't just be dragged out. I mean, I can see where the legal targeting is going to try to drag this out for over 12 months so that there has to be yet another legislative pull, because we all, as pro-lifers, were very happy with the 12 months, but said it should have been even longer.
Sure. And even if it had been the originally intended 10 years, we would have still said that's not long enough. I mean, it's always an incremental step. It's always, little steps forward that we always have to keep defending and pushing for more. But, another dimension of this that our listeners should realize is that the judge had to actually amend her temporary restraining order because, as you know, as a constitutional attorney, for these TROs to be issued, you have to foresee some likelihood of success on the merits. In other words, while the case is argued on the merits, is it ultimately going to prevail? And so Planned Parenthood made a number of claims, including the one that we were just discussing, we're being legislatively punished or we're being discriminated against. But they also made another claim, and this claim was the only one that was judged in the amended order to have any likelihood of success. And that was Planned Parenthood said, well, wait a minute, we have a lot of different affiliates. Not all of those affiliates are providing elective abortion. So if the law says there cannot be Medicaid funding if you're providing elective abortion, well, then it doesn't apply to these affiliates. Okay, so that's a claim that, if the court wants to litigate that claim, go right ahead. But the fact of the matter is that despite only that claim being considered to have likelihood of success, the restraining order restores the funding to Planned Parenthood affiliates, even though the ones, most of which are providing the abortions. So it's like, how does that make sense? If you're just going to limit it to that claim about the affiliates that don't do abortions, well then restore the funding only to them, not to the entirety of Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes so much sense. And so hopefully as this makes its way up through the appeals process, and I have no doubt that this will be appealed and continued, that this will be reversed, and the One Big Beautiful Bill will actually be implemented as Congress passed and President Trump signed. In the last 2 minutes I have with you, Father Frank Pavone, founder of Priests for Life. You can follow him on X. At FR Frank Pavone. Let's also talk about this federal government policy that seeks to restore religious freedom in the workplace. This is another instance where this type of protection is great coming from President Trump, but it shouldn't have even been necessary. We have seen over and over that as our society has been continually secularized, that people of faith have consistently enjoyed less rights, it seems, than others to express our viewpoint in the workplace or even in greater society. So this is a good thing.
Trump has been saying and doing for the last decade. He established a task force to stop anti-Christian bias, and this is one of the practical applications of that. And, it's consistent with everything he's been saying. He's been saying to students on campus, you have the right to express your religion on campus. He's been saying to clergy in the pulpit, America needs your voice. Speak freely. He's been saying now to people in the workplace, you believe in something? Express it. The Supreme Court said to Coach Kennedy, you're in a public school, but you want to pray openly on the ball field, you go for it. This is America. And the fact that, as not only President Trump says, but as our founders declared, the fact that religious expression and religion itself is essential to self-governance and for the good of America, that does not constitute an imposition or establishment of religion. People are free to express or not to express. People are free to express one particular type of faith. Others will express a different one. That freedom is not taken away. Our founders neither wanted religion without freedom, which would mean imposing a particular creed, nor did they want freedom without religion, which would be the naked public square, the secular state. The administration is hitting just the right balance here, and the best way to defend and continue to defend our religious freedom is to exercise it without fear. People should increase now the expression of their faith in their workplace and, in fact, everywhere else.
Yeah, that's so well said, because, so many people who are anti-religious expression and in the greater context of freedom of speech would say, well, that makes me uncomfortable, or, we shouldn't have this type of proselytizing in the workplace and all of this. And, well, they don't have similar restrictions on anyone else's viewpoints of God or even political speech. It's very interesting to see how it seems like conservatives are the only ones that can't express our viewpoints because the snowflakes don't want to hear it. But then anyone who's living any particular lifestyle that they want, well, if we just say, I disagree with that, then suddenly, you're bigoted, you're hateful, and how dare you? And so we've seen this kind of two-tier system even within the context of freedom of expression for a long time. And so I think you're right in saying that this is the right tone, because it's not elevating people of faith as somehow their speech is even more protected in an unconstitutional sense. It's just saying, everyone's speech and people of faith should have the ability to express their viewpoints. And that's exactly what the founders wanted. More speech is better.
Exactly. And if I express my faith through my speech or through my garb or through a cross on my desk or something like that, I'm not trying to offend somebody. I'm not intending any offense. I'm not denigrating anybody else's faith. And, I mean, in a sense, we all have to grow up. I mean, sometimes being offended, that's the price you pay to live in a society of free speech.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, notably, it was interesting, this coming from Fox News, notably the memo gives explicit permission for an employee to keep a Bible on his or her desk. An employee may keep that Bible on the desk, may read it during breaks. Similarly, an employee may keep rosary beads or, other such religious items on their desk during breaks, can use such items to pray. An agency may restrict posts on social media, but an agency may not single out religious Posts such as those of a crucifix, a Bible verse, a Star of David, or anything else, those are just examples for harsher treatment. An employee may wear a cross as well as clothing displaying a religious message. So this is a really good trend, and I'm really glad to see that President Trump isn't just going for, all of the other policy that we definitely as voters put into the Trump mandate, but is also making sure to put an emphasis on religious freedom and pro-life. So Father Frank Pavone, as always, thank you so much for your time. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
Hi, my name's Neil. I have some advice for you if you've been trying to break free from credit card debt. You can start by doing what I did. Get your bills together and call Trinity Debt Management. Trinity is dedicated to helping people like me become debt-free. When I called, my first experience was a feeling of relief. My counselor was kind, and best of all, she didn't judge me. In just a few minutes, she helped me figure out a plan that consolidated all my bills into one lower monthly payment. This substantially reduced my high interest rates and put me on the road to success. In the end, I saved thousands in interest, and today, my credit card debt is a thing of the past.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Neil. Take it from someone who's been there. Call Trinity and become debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
This is the Lost in Translation Ministry Minute. Here now is your host, Dr. Baruch Korman.
We find that spiritual adultery is idolatry. Marriage is a covenant, and both parties need to be faithful to that marriage covenant, the agreements, the fidelity, what an important word, and what a abused subject today in so many different ways in the media. And we should be faithful and demonstrate fidelity spiritually to our God, putting Him first and having no other gods, as we learn right off the bat in the Ten Commandments, only Him.
Learn more about the teaching ministry of Dr. Baruch Korman at loveisrael.org. You'll find videos on almost any biblical topic on his YouTube page and on the My Bible Study app. That's loveisrael.org.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. A man armed with a pocket knife caused mayhem inside a Walmart in Traverse City, Michigan. At least 11 people injured, many critically. The man tried to behead one of the victims, but thanks to several bystanders, the madman was stopped. A Marine Corps veteran on vacation rushed over to lend a helping hand, taking down the bad guy with a grocery cart. Another shopper, a law-abiding gun owner, pulled out his weapon and ordered the suspect to surrender. The sheriff said the actions of those brave American men stopped the carnage. The two Good Samaritans are great American patriots and heroes, and a reminder to everybody that we should all be ready to answer the call to assist our fellow countrymen in a time of need. Not so long ago, there was a time when such behavior was criticized as toxic masculinity. But when there's a madman running around Walmart with a knife, that's exactly the kind of masculinity you want. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, 'tis the season that we are starting to talk about the midterms already. And CNN dropped a piece a couple days ago titled "What Polls Show About a Very Confusing Political Landscape." So it starts with the political landscape right now is more confusing than a corn maze, according to this author. For every data point that suggests Republicans face headwinds, there seems to be another that suggests Democrats should hold their britches. It leaves this all leaves this political analyst writing for CNN wondering just what is going on out there, to paraphrase the great Vince Lombardi. So Trump's popularity is what they started with a Gallup releasing a poll last week, putting Trump's approval rating at 37%, down from the beginning of his second term with 47%. And that poll made a lot of press, but that was everyone collectively, is my understanding, not necessarily just the MAGA base. But at the same time, what will all of the lack of release of the Epstein files and all of that do for the midterms? Well, we're not totally sure. So party identification is another issue that pollsters will almost always ask how people identify themselves, Democrat, Republican, or independent. Then they'll follow up by asking independents whether they lean toward the Democratic or Republican side of the aisle. And so party identification is one of the fundamental variables to understand how people will or might vote. Most Democrats vote for Democrat candidates, while most Republicans vote for Republican candidates. So, according to CNN, no wonder a lot of people took note of the Pew Research Center's annual benchmark poll that was released also last week that showed 46% of the country were Republican or leaned Republican to 45% who are Democrat or leaned Democratic. That split is actually very reflective of the very slim margins of Republicans in the House and the Senate. And CNN goes on to say that margin is no different from last year's version of the poll before Trump won the presidency again by a landslide. So Quinnipiac also shows a pretty clear swing to the Democrats over the course of the year. During the January to February period, Republicans, including leaners, held a 1 to 3 point advantage on party affiliation. So is this all confusing, or how do we make sense of this data in terms of trying to predict where the midterms will go? Well, let's welcome in Mark Mitchell, who is the CEO of Rasmussen Reports. Mark, I know you do a lot in the pollster world. So with all of these together, how do we make sense of this very confusing political landscape?
Well, it is confusing, and that's because Donald Trump completely changed the entire political landscape. And part of the problem is you have all these people prognosticating using tools that used to work 10, 20, 30 years ago, but they just don't anymore. Like all the people with proprietary panels, well, they have to build in Trump supporters, and if they don't, they're not going to be predictive. And what they have is, very little crossover. The Democrats will always vote Democrats, or Republicans always vote Republicans in their polling. And then you have Gallup, who is 20 points to the left of us, even though we were most accurate in the fall. And then you have the Pew thing, which is right. Republicans do have a slight edge in party ID. I don't know how much stock I'd put in registration numbers because of how many people, switch to Republicans to vote Nikki Haley and that kind of thing. But party ID definitely favors Republicans. That's how Donald Trump won. So the problem is that Donald Trump's, the Republicans in the fall aren't just running against Democrats, they're running against the couch. And that's the really big problem. And so what I just say, looking at the numbers that I rely on, is that Donald Trump's approval rating didn't come in with a massive honeymoon, but it was pretty strong almost his entire second term, except for a little spin in August there, or April there, where the market imploded. But since July 4th, it's been a mess. He went from net +8 down to net +4 right now. That's 1 point away from the lowest of his term. And it just doesn't make any sense because he should be soaring right now. He took out the Iranian nuclear program. He got his signature legislation passed. And it's not soaring. It's plunging. And it's not quite as bad as Biden yet, but it really is tracking with Biden's collapse. Biden 4 years ago was 2 weeks away from Afghanistan. And people say, well, it's super early. But Biden never recovered from his collapse post-Afghanistan. Now, are Trump's numbers horrible? No, they're not. He's got a 47% approve, 51% disapprove as of yesterday. The lowest that Trump got in his first term in our numbers was 37. The lowest Biden got was 37. Will he get that low? I don't think he will, because I think he's convinced a lot of people to just implicitly trust him. But the problem is that doesn't convert necessarily to ballot wins in November. And we already know that the Democrats ubiquitously have the upper hand in electioneering and fundraising. People say the Democrats aren't fundraising. Well, yeah, they are. It's all just pouring through ActBlue right now. $400 million a quarter. And you know that they're going to run all their candidates as moderates. They're really good at positioning their candidates as moderates. The Republicans are also really good at positioning their candidates as moderate. But that's a problem when the MAGA agenda is what is popular. And so this is all really a problem. I don't think the Epstein thing is going away. And that is, we polled right in the middle of that. And there was a lot of specific polling that showed that the Trump administration was on the wrong side of this issue. But the big one is that our generic ballot poll, if the election were held today, would you vote for a Republican or a Democrat candidate, is Democrat +4 right now. And that makes sense. Like, that's what's supposed to happen historically. The party in power loses it in the next midterm. But that's also pretty dangerous for the Trump agenda. It's going to drive his legislation to a halt. The Democrats are going to use their power in a very insane manner, probably to do performative show trials about Epstein stuff. And that's what we're going to have for the back half of the Trump term, unless the Republicans dig deep and pull a rabbit out of the hat. And I don't know what it's going to be, but it doesn't look like the current set of Republicans is ready to do it, considering they're doing things like fighting Trump on recess appointments. Like, what is that?
Yeah, and all of this, again, is very confusing, even how Republicans in Congress are not helping the narrative and helping Trump's popularity when they're doing things like this. They're not passing signature legislation other than the one big beautiful bill. But that really didn't get a whole lot of play, at least in terms of boosting the Trump mandate overall. And I think for a lot of people, because that bill was so big and there were so many different parts of it, there wasn't really, I mean, there were a couple of things that people kind of honed in on, especially for pro-life advocates, the 12-month Planned Parenthood, defunding, there was border security, some of that. But there wasn't really kind of one big wow factor that people said, this is an amazing piece of legislation. And so it seems like Republicans really didn't sell that all that well, and it definitely didn't make the splash that the Epstein files and this whole controversy did. So where does that leave kind of the MAGA base, who's not, the typical just pro-Republican voter?
Well, let's just call that one big beautiful bill what it is, which is Washington, D.C. garbage. And quite frankly, the Republicans weren't really interested in marketing it. Trump tried to market it, and he did, I guess, a moderate job. But you're right, there's no one thing looking back where you could say in a headline, America just got this. And everybody, oh, wait, America got the tax cut extended. Yeah, of course they did. But you know what? Americans aren't necessarily going to give Republicans credit for that. And so that's the problem, is that everything that's happened since the middle of June has been kind of a big chaotic mess. Like, for instance, the idea of taking out Iranian nuclear programs is very popular, but also at the same time, for a lot of people, Israel is not as popular as it was a year or two ago. It's gone from net plus 30 to net plus 14, in one of our tracking questions. And so there was a lot of chaos and confusion and consternation about that particular event, too. And so my advice, unfortunately, my advice for Trump is to get more aggressive with the Republican Party. Stop endorsing these people we all know are swamp creatures, and hold them to account and excoriate them for not doing what America wants. And in my opinion, what America wants is fairness, accountability, and very popular, very specific things, because that's what they responded to back in January, February, March. We were seeing very discrete little factoids drop in the news. That's when right direction polling hit records. That's when 55% thought Trump 2.0 was going to usher in a golden era for America. And we've completely lost it. Now D.C. looks like it's doing what D.C. usually does, and business as usual polls really bad, like negative 60. So people look at D.C., and remember, Kamala Harris convinced 48% of the electorate to vote for her, but only 30% trust the federal government. Congress has excellent rating in the teens. And so the problem is, and I talked with this about, Matt Gaetz said this on his show yesterday when I talked to him about it, is that Republicans aren't going to ever pass single-page popular legislation. But give Americans voter ID tomorrow and see what happens in the headlines and see how you're treated. They're going to love it. But the problem is that they can't get their pound of flesh. They can't pat each other on the back and stuff each other's pockets. And that's, I think, very cynically, probably what happened with the one big beautiful bill. And it was even nice of them, I guess, to put a veneer of codifying executive orders into it. But who wrote that thing? Where did it come from? How long has it been in the works? And did the voters have a say in it? And I think you'll find the answer is like 95% no.
Yeah, and I think that overall sentiment, Mark Mitchell, he's the CEO of Rasmussen, my special guest this morning. We're talking about, what the polls show about a very confusing political landscape. I think what's fascinating about this moment in time and heading up to the midterms is that both sides, it kind of seems like their bases aren't really that happy, because we're seeing a lot of this kind of chaos from the Democrats as they have some problems certainly with optics, especially with the New York mayoral race, with not being positioned there as a moderate. They don't really have a leader. They don't really have good messaging. But on the other side, Republicans and the regular MAGA base are increasingly frustrated with some of this, especially for Congress. And it seems like Trump hasn't been able to use his political capital to get Congress motivated, especially the Senate, for these appointments. And it was interesting to me to see the youth voter dynamics. So the question on one of the polls, which party do you feel better represents your views on immigration, the economy, and cultural representation? That was specifically for Latinos. Young Latino and formerly Trump-leaning voters increasingly distrust both parties. So do you think that we're going to start seeing in kind of the twilight years of the Trump era, that we're going to start seeing some of these people who are very motivated to come out and get on board with the MAGA crowd not actually translate into political voters long term?
I mean, that's the trend I've been tracking for 10 years now because, again, my polling shows a lot more crossover and a lot more conservative, politically homeless independents. And I think that really reflects what we've been seeing at the ballot box. And I'll tell you, the independents let's step back and look at Republicans and Democrats. First off, the Democrat Party favorability is not 19%. We just tested it. It's 47%. Republicans, it's 48%. Democrats just didn't disappear. And quite frankly, for Democrats, they vote for their most common denominator. Republicans vote for their least common denominator. So if like a Republican voter is unhappy with anybody, they're going to stay home, right? If a Democrat voter is happy with anybody. And right now, the Democrats' national picture is pretty much a mess. Like everybody there is a loser, in my opinion. But they don't need that. They have the party, and they're going to vote for the party, and they're going to come out because they have a big, well-funded machine, and they have a lot of affluent white liberals who are just going to turn out no matter what. On the Republican side, again, Trump turns these people out and did in record numbers. But, I look at independents, and I see Trump had a +6 job approval rating with them at the end of January, and it got down to -19 in the middle of this Epstein stuff. And the independents are really, really, really mad about Epstein. You can say it doesn't matter, but, he's got a poor rating on the Epstein issue with independents in the 40s. Only less than 20% give him an excellent or good. Only 14% of independents say the case is closed. 70% of them think there's wealthy and powerful predators who need to be held to account. And right there, that's an issue. But then you look at Republicans, and we ask the question, agree or disagree, Republicans in Congress have not delivered on the mandate that Trump was delivered in the ballot box. 60% of Republicans agreed with that in May. And now only 38% of Trump 2024 voters have a very favorable impression of the Republican Party. So the Republican Party, though, is still viewed, I guess, 5 to 10%, depending on the question, better than Democrats, but they have equal voter enthusiasm, and the Democrats don't need that edge. They just don't. They're going to turn out. And so that's the problem is that, again, you could look at Trump's wins and say he's cranking out wins, but he's not getting credit for them right now, and Republicans are certainly not getting credit. And again, with the 18 to 29-year-olds, there's just so many signs. 18 to 29-year-olds were pretty conservative, more than they've ever been. They actually had a 50% Trump approval rating at one point. But the Democrats have a brand advantage of almost 20 points among 18 to 29-year-olds of net favorable. So, this is the problem, is that Trump, did a great job building a coalition in the fall. It depended on Republicans performing, and they're not. We all know they're not. The legislative agenda is crap. They haven't gotten any of these appointments through, to be honest with you. They've been fighting them every step of the way. And you know what? We knew this from the beginning when everybody was scratching their head and looking at the names Thune and Cornyn. The Democrats, if they get control of the Senate, they're probably going to get rid of the 60-vote filibuster rule, and they're probably going to grind Trump's agenda to a halt. And, if they ever get in power again, you're just going to see crazy stuff. They're going to pack the court this time. You know why? Because they tried to put their political opponent in jail. And so the Republicans, you look at, and again, I know in general, on average, they're very, very principled. But that's kind of the problem. It leaves a huge power vacuum, and then you have all these special outside influences that can come in and dump money and buy people in the Senate, and the entire Republican infrastructure, too, I'm pretty sure is corrupt. I know Watley's at the head of the RNC, but tell me, how are decisions made in the NSRC? How are decisions made in the NRCC? Is it still just allocating donor capital into labyrinthian campaign kickback schemes, or are they backing people based on principle and using their money in the most efficient manner? I think we all know the answer to that question. And people are like, well, we can fix this by running against rhinos. You can't. The establishment will sandbag these people at every step of the way. They won't let donors donate to them. They'll use their own vendors against them. They'll literally run ads for the Democrat opponent to keep MAGA people from getting in, because the establishment Republicans are the establishment.
Yeah, and it was very disappointing, quite frankly, to see President Trump endorse Joe Gruters for the head of the RNC. For those who aren't aware of him, coming out of Florida, just probably one of the worst, in my opinion, candidates to head up the RNC and to back him. So it just begs the question, what is Trump thinking on all of this? And does he realize that if Democrats get control of the Congress, then it's going to be 2 years of just all of this nonsense instead of moving the mandate forward? We'll be right back with more. Thanks so much, Mark Mitchell.
In a recent survey of 1,200 left of center American adults, 55% responded that assassinating Donald Trump could be justified. We're swimming in shark-infested cultural waters. Some are suffering from Christianophobia. Jesus said, if they persecuted me, they'll also persecute you. Please give today to help AFA keep equipping you and others to stand for Christ. Help us shine His light into our dark culture. Visit afa.net/warrior.
Fostering and adoption is not a Band-Aid for infertility. It is a calling, and God can change the desire of your heart and make that so rewarding. It's the most beautiful, selfless thing. It's pure religion, but it's not a fix to I desire biological child. God has to deal with that in your heart separately.
Hannah's Heart, encouraging couples through infertility and miscarriage. Saturdays, 4 a.m. Central on AFR or on the AFR app.
Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its savor, how will it be seasoned? My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Matt Walsh wrote a piece for the Daily Wire where he said, "The contemporary American Christian is the most open-minded person to have ever existed. He's so open-minded, you can hardly tell he's Christian or has a mind at all. He has for a long time been open to the idea that marriage isn't permanent and sex isn't meant exclusively for marriage. He's basically open to whatever notions are popular. He is open, and where he is not open, he is silent."
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association. This July, we celebrate the birth of our nation and remember the heroes who fought for our freedoms. But did you know there are Americans today who don't have the freedom of life and liberty? Every day, unborn babies' very lives are under attack. But because of preborn, we can rescue them.
I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
Ultrasounds save lives. And when you save a life at a preborn network clinic, you often save a soul, as over 85,000 women have come to know Christ. To learn more about preborn's life-saving work, call pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby. Or visit preborn.com/AFR. That's preborn.com/AFR. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. So just moments ago, there was more breaking news on the Manhattan shooting suspect who claimed to have CTE, which this would stand for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and it's a brain disease linked to repeated hits to the head, often seen in military veterans and athletes, including football players, hockey players, and boxers. So the 27-year-old man who allegedly killed 4 people, wounded a 5th, and then turned the gun on himself at a Midtown Manhattan office building on Monday carried a note in his pocket claiming he suffered from CTE and asking that his brain be studied. Police sources told ABC News, and this coming from a number of sources. The note also made references to the NFL, whose headquarters was in this building, and the shooting took place at 345 Park Avenue, which houses, among other companies, the NFL's headquarters. So that whole discussion, surrounding these types of mental health issues and how that goes into a lot of these acts of violence, of course, need to be discussed. And the left is immediately going toward, as they often do in the aftermath of these types of, violent decisions and occurrences that are just absolutely horrific. They go immediately to gun control. And we're seeing that a lot of the Democrat members of Congress in the immediate aftermath are talking about how this shooter allegedly took his gun across state lines and, among other things, and said, we need to have more gun control. But is that really the direction that we need to be going? And what may Congress do about it? Well, let's welcome in Representative Tom Tiffany from the great state of Wisconsin. Representative Tiffany, I know that you're no stranger to being in Congress in the aftermath of headlines such as these. And what do you make of where Democrats go in this immediate aftermath, and where should Congress go in terms of, just dealing with these types of clearly, I think, mental health concerns?
Yeah, it is a big problem for society. There's no doubt about it. But to just say that, okay, we're going to take law-abiding gun owners and say, you have to give up your gun, that's not the route to go. I mean, remember, there was just a story a couple days ago in Traverse City, Michigan, of a knife-wielding guy who was stabbed multiple people, and fortunately there was a person there with a gun who, I can't remember if he shot the guy or whatever, but nonetheless he stopped the attack. A good guy with a gun stops a lot of these attacks, and we never hear about those stories. I think the bigger thing that Democrats miss in regards to this, Jenna, is that gun control has never worked wherever it's been used. It simply does not work. I'll tell you, there's really something very interesting happening where people across political lines are starting to take a look at, and that is the use of advanced tasers. And in that way, not having, if someone is shot, let's say a bad guy is shot, or someone that's committing a crime, you're not going to kill them. I actually think there's a variety of ways we can go about this that can be much more effective. But one of the things that's going on is the soft on crime policies by Democrats have left more guns on the streets. I mean, when they come out and they say, we got to get rid of guns, well, why don't they make sure that people serve prison sentences that are carrying weapons illegally rather than giving this soft touch approach to criminals who have carried guns? They're speaking out of both sides of their mouths sometimes.
Yeah, really well said. And I think it's worthwhile to note that these types of gun control policies have never worked. And we've seen that even in other jurisdictions across the world, other countries that have harsher regulations, and in either the criminals just get guns anyway, or you see them use other types of weapons for acts of violence. And so, the issue really boils down to worldview, and also this is one reason, as we've seen a lot of these types of headlines of violence that's being committed against Americans, here in our country, that a lot of these acts of terror, and there's some speculation that this shooter in Manhattan could have had ties to terror organizations as well, that a lot of this also is about border control and ensuring that the mass deportations that President Trump promised and should deliver will remove a lot of these violent offenders. And so in the wake of the One Big Beautiful Bill and that passage, where is Congress at in terms of helping that particular agenda in terms of border security and mass deportation?
Yeah, it was one of the key components, as everyone knows, is, first of all, the president has secured the border for the first time in decades, and but these mass deportations will happen, in particular with people with criminal records. They are removing them, and it is very unfortunate that ICE is being attacked the way they are, but we have provided more money for ICE, more money for the Border Patrol, and we have provided the money to put up the walls as well as a barrier on rivers like the Rio Grande. We're going to have a secure border, and we're going to have people removed from the country who should not be here, who are here illegally, in particular those that have committed violent crimes. So that is one of the key components that was in the Big Beautiful Bill that is going to help us. And it's going to reduce crime here in America, because in spite of what the left says, that, oh, these people, I mean, we've had people come before the Judiciary Committee telling us about how these people commit less crimes than Americans do. They're cherry picking the data that is not correct.
Yeah, and it seems like the left always does that. They cherry pick data that's helpful to them, and then they ignore the rest of the data and the facts that really prove that their position is not tenable. And that brings us to another headline that I wanted your comment on, Representative Tom Tiffany, my special guest this morning from the great state of Wisconsin. This coming from Fox News. The DHS is saying that 2 teens would still be alive if not for sanctuary policies protecting illegal immigrants. So the DHS says sanctuary jurisdiction protected an illegal alien who had a previous drunk driving conviction is now accused of killing 2 teens in a DUI crash in Dane County, Wisconsin. Headlines like these are so infuriating, because when you see how easy it would have been to prevent this type of tragedy from occurring, and yet you see sanctuary city policies, all over the country, and especially in even more blue states, this kind of thing is just completely antithetical to what should be our American system of government and, frankly, law and order.
Yes, so we sent a letter to the sheriff of Dane County, which is Madison, a number of months ago, and we said, when are you going to stop your sanctuary policies? And he sent a pithy reply back saying, no, we are not a sanctuary county. Well, they are, and they proved it once again. All you got to do is look at the picture of these 2 beautiful teenage young adults that are now dead as a result of a repeat offense drunk driver that was here illegally in America. And remember what happens here. They being the Dane County Sheriff's Department, because they've been instructed by their elected leadership, you will not communicate with ICE when someone should be put on a detainer and removed from the United States, which this person should have been done a number of years ago with that first offense, drunk driving. They got to stay here. Now they're driving the wrong way on an interstate at a high rate of speed, and they killed 2 kids. I mean, it is so unfortunate, and we're seeing this happen repeatedly. I mean, we had it happen in my district in northern Wisconsin, where a repeat offense drunk driver ran somebody off the road, and 3 girls no longer have a father. This stuff happens time after time in these various different ways. The sanctuary policies need to end.
Yeah, absolutely. And what, if anything, is being done with that? Because clearly the Constitution is on the side of the federal government, saying that sanctuary cities can't be tolerated. This isn't something that should be a state issue in terms of states being able to override the province of the federal government in terms of immigration law and its enforcement. And so with all of these things continuing to go on, where is Congress in all of this?
Yeah, we have a bill that we've signed on to that would remove funding for sanctuary communities. In other words, you're going to get no more federal funding, whether it's for law enforcement, health services, whatever the case may be. If you're not going to follow federal law, then you should not receive federal funds. And I'm hoping the administration is going to follow through on this administratively also, besides us having that bill out there, to say to them, you no longer are going to get this funding. And I think the administration, I don't know if they've done this yet, but I know they are looking at it, and hopefully they will follow through. Because, I mean, so while they pretend that they live in this bubble, whether it's Madison, Wisconsin, San Francisco, or wherever they are, the sanctuary communities, they don't, because people from all over the state and the country visit these places and they end up being harmed. In fact, I think these two young people that got killed, I think they were from Minnesota. So think about it. As a result of the sanctuary policies in Dane County, Wisconsin, 2 people just coming through Dane County from Minnesota are now dead.
Yeah, and so we're seeing how the policies of these states don't just affect the local communities, but even visitors. And you posted on your X account this year, 160 House Democrats voted against deporting illegal aliens convicted of drunk driving. Now 2 teens are dead, killed by an illegal alien with a previous drunk driving conviction. This is what happens when politicians put illegals over American lives. And it's frustrating to see, as we've been talking about, Representative Tom Tiffany, that it seems like there's only outrage when the tragedy occurs. But at the moment that it could have been prevented with a previous conviction, or even getting rid of sanctuary city policies, these types of deportations, at every step along the way that this could have been prevented, it seems like it's the left and the Democrats that are refusing to implement policies that actually protect Americans and are just safe and reasonable for society. And yet we're seeing, as I was talking to the guest in the last segment, that there are still, in terms of voters across the country, there's still really about a 50-50 in terms of people who vote for Democrats versus Republicans. And I find that really frustrating when you look at the difference in policy. And so is this more of a messaging issue for Republicans? Is this more of an issue of not being able to get a legislation passed that would actually prevail on some of these issues, like sanctuary city policies, or is this just a problem with reaching voters to actually explain the differences in the worldview and mindset between the two parties?
What I say repeatedly, Jenna, is bold colors, clear contrast. That's what President Trump did, and it's part of the reason why he won in November of 2024 here in Wisconsin, is he spoke in very clear tones, and he provided that contrast between Republicans and Democrats. There's so many issues like this, you know, whether it's sex changes, you name the issue, including this border security issue, and it's very clear who's right about it. And it is a 70-30 or 80-20 issue. And we Republicans have to message. I mean, I look at us first, Jenna, rather than the other side. We know they're wrong, but we have to deliver that clear contrast, because like in Wisconsin here, we have a governor who accepts these sanctuary cities. He will, Governor Evers will allow this to continue. Now, he's going to retire after this term, and we as Republicans need to make sure that we are providing that clear contrast with Democrats who are going to defend sanctuary policies here in Wisconsin. We need to highlight for the voters the deadly consequences as a result of those policies.
Yeah, so well said. And so what, in just the last few minutes we have with you, Representative Tom Tiffany, what is on the docket in terms of Congress making some of these changes and messaging and so forth, as we're starting to get into, kind of the preliminaries of the midterms?
Yeah, this will be one of the key issues. And we have a bill to end sanctuary policies. We have a bill, the SAVE Act, to make sure that only legal citizens vote. We put in the big, beautiful bill, work requirements. I mean, all these 70 and 80% issues, we're talking about them. We are introducing bills. we are implementing policies. Remember, in the Big Beautiful Bill, I think there were like 25 executive orders that were codified in the Big Beautiful Bill. One of the things we've been hearing from our conservative voters is, when are you guys going to codify those executive orders? And they're absolutely right about that, and we need to do more of them. But there were 25, I think, in the Big Beautiful Bill. So there's stuff that we've gotten done, and as we look back at the first 6 months, there's really good stuff that has happened. We need to message it to the people. Like Medicaid, for example. We need to talk to the people about who is going to be removed from the Medicaid rolls. It's illegal aliens and those who are able-bodied and can work. That's who are being removed. We need to be bold and talk about the reforms that we put in place.
Absolutely. Well, Representative Tom Tiffany, thanks so much for your work on Capitol Hill and joining as always. And for listeners, you can always reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.